In this video, we're going to be talking about market cycles, specifically the crypto market cycle. So it's important to recognize that all markets go in cycles. They can't just move in one direction forever. So if you ever buy an investment, you can't expect that investment to only go up for the entire time that you hold the investment. Markets go through different cycles. So sometimes they go up, sometimes they have periods where they dip back down, and sometimes they have periods where they just go sideways. There's not a lot of movement up or down. So in understanding the market cycle of any market that you're trading is really important because it helps you have a longer term vision. When things start to go wrong and things start to dip down and you see a little bit of red on your screen, if you understand how markets cycle and you understand what part of the cycle you're in, it tends to make your life a lot easier, tends to give you peace of mind, and it gives you a perspective to be able to take advantage of the market cycles. The actual market cycle is a lot more complex than this, but we're going to sum it up into four main parts of a market cycle. The first part of any market cycle is the early adoption phase. That's where individuals who are either creating something or who are around the people creating it, they tend to get word about these investments a little bit early. So we'll use a very mainstream example right now. Let's take Dogecoin. There was early Dogecoin adopters in 2013 when that project first launched. So those individuals have been accumulating a position, which means they've been building up their investment in Dogecoin since 2013 up until that bull run in 2017. So the early adopters came in at the very beginning of the market when there wasn't a lot of hype around it and not a lot of individuals knew what it was. The next step is mainstream recognition. This is when a lot of other individuals start to get involved. They start to understand that there is an investment out there that could be good for them, and they start to do their research. We might see this on social media. We might see it show up on one of the financial news networks. That's mainstream recognition. Now, there's a step that comes right after mainstream recognition, which is speculative bubble activity. Speculative is a nicer way to say gambling because you're essentially betting on an outcome that you don't really know. The bubble activity, a bubble is when a market gets overinflated. There's too many people in the market. They're buying at prices that don't really make sense. They're buying things very expensive just to be in the market. And that type of bubble activity is usually unhealthy for the market. So speculative bubble activity usually comes in when individuals who missed the early adoption and who missed mainstream recognition, they kind of feel like they're missing out on that investment. And so they start to pile in at late prices. And late prices means that something is very expensive and they just want to get in for the sake of being in. That usually leads to the last phase, which is a market correction. If there's too much speculative bubble activity and the market gets overinflated, which means it gets too big, then all of a sudden, investors who got in early and the mainstream recognition investors, they start to take profits. So they pull money out of the market and secure it. What happens when you pull money out of a market? The market ends up dropping. And then when the market drops, it kicks out a lot of the people who weren't really there for a good reason. They were just chasing the hype. And then it starts the cycle again. When the market's really low and no one's interested in it, there's early adopters that come in and say, hey, this coin is really low right now, or this investment is really low right now. Maybe we should buy it up at a discount. And then again, the cycle starts. Mainstream recognition comes back. It starts to come back into fashion. Then everybody's like, oh, I missed out last time. I'm not going to be a sucker this time. They try to get in again. And that's where speculative bubble activity builds. And then we have a market correction. This happens all the time. It happens every year with different assets. And with crypto in general, it loves to follow this market cycle. Now, this is going to be posted in the notes for the course, but just to kind of recap what we just talked about, the early adoption phase is where early adopters discover a technology and begin to build a foundation for mainstream recognition. So the people who get in at the very, very beginning, they're the ones who start the group chats, the websites. They're the ones who start the forums. They're the ones who start the blogs. They're the ones who make the memes. They're the ones who start the brands that get this thing ready for mainstream adoption. Mainstream recognition is the public becomes aware of the technology. And this is where true adoption happens. So when mainstream adoption happens, this is not bubble activity. This is when folks are actually learning about this stuff. They're actually seeing, hey, this has a pretty big future. And so this tends to attract responsible investors who see potential in that investment. A speculative bubble is a late stage. So latecomers to the game feel like they missed the train, so they rush into the market at high valuations. And high valuations just mean that the market is very, very expensive, and smart investors are not really looking to buy more. They're looking to get out. And then last but not least is the correction phase. The early adopters take profits. New investors enter the market. Leverage and margin gets punished. And what leverage and margin gets punished means is that folks who are trading with leverage, so you have $100 in an account and your broker is allowing you to trade with $500, that's margin. Those folks tend to get the most hurt because when the market crashes, you tend to owe a lot of money or you're in the hole a lot worse. So that's the way that the market cycles go. There's early adoption, mainstream recognition, speculative bubble activity, and then a correction. Guys, this applies to every market. So I hope that you learned something new here. And I hope that you guys can apply this to all the other markets that you may potentially trade for the rest of your life. If you have any more questions, make sure to reach out to a coach. This is the end of the market cycle video.